Your position is being eliminated in our restructuring. My name is Ryan Faulkner. I was 51 when they let me go from Veltri Dynamics, a wholesale distributor in Kansas City, Missouri. 15 years I had managed their inventory forecasting. 15 years of perfect predictions, of keeping their warehouses balanced, of saving them millions by knowing exactly what would sell and when. The woman from Human Resources sat across from me in the sterile conference room, her hands folded over a manila folder. She avoided eye contact when she delivered the news. Behind her, through the glass wall, I could see the warehouse floor where my algorithms had been running like clockwork for over a decade. "This is effective immediately," she continued. "We have a generous severance package prepared." I nodded, did not argue, did not ask why they were cutting the one department that had never missed a quarterly target. The woman seemed surprised by my calm reaction. Maybe she expected anger or pleading. Instead, I asked one simple question. Who is taking over forecasting? We will be transitioning those responsibilities to our new Vice President of Operations, Trevor Hamilton. He has extensive experience in supply chain optimization. Trevor Hamilton. I knew the name. Young guy, maybe 35, with an MBA from some prestigious school. He'd been making rounds through the company for the past 3 months, asking pointed questions about our outdated methodologies and talking about revolutionary approaches to predictive analytics. "I see," I said. She slid the severance papers across the table. The amount was fair, maybe even generous. 3 months of salary plus benefits. They wanted me gone quickly and quietly. I signed without reading the fine print. Walking back to my office to collect my things, I passed Trevor's temporary workspace. He was hunched over his laptop, surrounded by printouts of supply chain reports I had prepared over the years. My reports, my data, my 15 years of refined forecasting models that had kept Veltri Dynamics profitable through 3 recessions and countless market shifts. He looked up as I passed, offering a polite nod. Professional, courteous, like he was not currently dismantling the system that had made this company a leader in wholesale distribution. I packed my personal items into a single cardboard box. A coffee mug my daughter had given me, a photo of my late wife, Rebecca, the small cactus that had somehow survived on my windowsill for 8 years. Everything else belonged to the company. The spreadsheets, the algorithms, the predictive models I had built from scratch. 20 minutes later, I was walking through the parking lot with my box under one arm and my final paycheck in my jacket pocket. The security guard, James, waved goodbye from his booth. He had worked here almost as long as I had. "Take care of yourself, Ryan," he called out. I would. I had started at Veltri Dynamics straight out of college, back when the company was just expanding beyond regional distribution. My degree was in supply chain management, but I had always been good with numbers, patterns, seeing connections that others missed. The first year I worked under Harold Morse, the previous forecasting manager. Harold was old school, relying on gut instinct and basic seasonal trends. His method worked, but barely. The company carried too much dead inventory and frequently ran short on popular items. I spent evenings building spreadsheets that tracked not just sales data, but weather patterns, economic indicators, competitor movements, and regional demographic shifts. Slowly, Harold started trusting my projections. When he retired 5 years later, I inherited his position and immediately implemented my systematic approach. The results spoke for themselves. Inventory turnover improved by 30% in my first year. Dead stock dropped to less than 2%. During the 2008 recession, while competitors were liquidating excess inventory at massive losses, Veltri remained profitable because we had anticipated the downturn and adjusted our purchasing accordingly. My wife Rebecca was proud of what I had built. She would listen patiently when I explained how seasonal flu patterns could predict demand for certain home goods, or how changes in gas prices would affect regional buying habits. She called me her crystal ball husband. Rebecca passed away 4 years ago. Cancer. After the funeral, work became my anchor. The numbers did not lie or leave. They were consistent and predictable, unlike everything else. Over the years, I had trained 3 junior analysts who eventually moved to other companies. Each one credited me with teaching them how to see beyond basic sales reports. Two of them still called occasionally for advice. But lately things had been shifting at Veltri. The company had been acquired by a larger corporation 8 months ago, and the new management brought different priorities. They talked about synergies and streamlined operations. They hired consultants who had never worked in wholesale distribution, but spoke confidently about best practices and industry standards. Trevor Hamilton was one of these consultants, promoted from within the parent company. During his first meeting with my team, he reviewed our forecasting methods with obvious skepticism. "These models seem quite complex," he had said, scanning through my quarterly presentation. "Are we certain this level of granular analysis is necessary? Most modern systems rely on simpler, more automated approaches." I explained how our complexity was actually precision, how tracking 17 different variables allowed us to predict market shifts 3 months in advance, how our outdated methods had delivered 15 years of consistent results. He smiled politely and made notes on his tablet. 2 weeks later, the restructuring was announced. My department was being optimized for efficiency. The writing had been on the wall, but I had ignored it, just like I had ignored the early warning signs when Rebecca first complained about being tired all the time. Some patterns, apparently, I was better at spotting than others. The call came on a Thursday afternoon in March, exactly 6 months after my termination. I was in my home office working on a freelance consulting project for a small regional distributor when my phone rang. "Ryan, this is David Kellerman." David Kellerman, Chief Executive Officer of Veltri Dynamics. In 15 years, he had called me directly exactly 3 times. Twice during crisis situations when my forecasts had prevented significant losses, and once to congratulate me on our record low inventory variance. "Hello, Mr. Kellerman." "Ryan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." His voice carried a weight I had never heard before. "Did you ever prepare forecasting models for the April through September period before you left?" I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Of course I had. I always worked 2 quarters ahead. It was standard practice, part of what made my predictions so reliable. "Yes, sir. I prepared preliminary forecasts through October, actually. They should be in the shared drive." "That is what I was afraid of." There was a long pause. "Ryan, we have a problem. A big problem. Trevor made some significant purchasing decisions that went against what I am now seeing were your recommendations. We are sitting on almost $4 million in unsellable inventory." $4 million. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Not surprise exactly. More like the confirmation of something I had been trying not to think about. "What kind of inventory?" "Outdoor furniture, garden supplies, seasonal sporting goods." Trevor anticipated a massive surge in demand based on what he called post-pandemic lifestyle trends. He tripled our normal orders. I did not say anything immediately. I was thinking about my forecast models, the ones that had predicted a 15% decrease in outdoor furniture sales due to economic uncertainty and changing consumer spending patterns. The models that had recommended reducing seasonal inventory by 20%, not increasing it. "Ryan, I need to ask you something else. Do you still have copies of those forecasts?" I did. I had copies of everything on my personal laptop. 15 years of refined algorithms, trend analyses, and predictive models. I had not planned to use them. Honestly, I had tried to forget about Veltri Dynamics completely. "Yes, I have them. Would you be willing to send them to me? And Ryan, I need you to know that if these forecasts are as accurate as your previous work, there are going to be some serious consequences for the people who ignored them." I stared at my computer screen where the small regional distributor's data was spread across multiple spreadsheets. Simple work, straightforward analysis, nothing like the complex system I had built at Veltri. "I will send them over this afternoon," I said. "Thank you. And Ryan, I am sorry about how things ended." The line went dead. I sat in my office for 20 minutes, not moving, just thinking. Then I opened my laptop and began pulling together the files. I spent 3 hours that afternoon assembling the forecast package. Not just the basic predictions, but the full analytical framework I had developed. Weather correlation data, economic indicator matrices, regional demographic models, and competitor analysis algorithms. Everything Trevor Hamilton would have needed to make informed purchasing decisions. The email I sent to David Kellerman was simple and professional. Mr. Kellerman, attached are the forecasting models and trend analyses for April through October. These were completed in February, 2 weeks before my departure. The recommendations included a 20% reduction in seasonal outdoor inventory due to projected economic headwinds and shifting consumer spending patterns. Please let me know if you need any clarification on the methodology. Best regards, Ryan Faulkner. I hit send at 4:17 p.m. and went to make coffee. My phone rang at 6:22 p.m. Ryan, I have been going through your forecast for the past 2 hours. David's voice was tight. Your models predicted almost exactly what happened, down to specific product categories and regional variations. How did Trevor miss this? Did he have access to the files? That is what I am trying to figure out. I spoke with information technology. They confirmed that your forecasting directory was never removed from the shared drive. Everything was still there when Trevor took over. I set down my coffee cup. So he had access to the models but chose not to use them? Worse than that, I found emails where Trevor specifically dismissed your approach as overly conservative and not aligned with current market opportunities. He convinced the purchasing team that your methods were outdated. There was a long pause. I could hear papers shuffling in the background. Ryan, I am looking at a spreadsheet Trevor prepared in April. He projected a 40% increase in outdoor furniture sales based on what he called social media trend analysis and lifestyle optimization data. Did you ever use social media metrics in your forecasting? I tested them, I said. Social media trends are too volatile and demographic specific to be reliable predictors of wholesale distribution demand. Consumer sentiment on social platforms does not translate directly to purchasing behavior at the retail level. That is exactly what your notes say in the methodology section. Trevor apparently did not read that far. I was quiet for a moment, processing what David was telling me. Trevor had not just ignored my forecasts. He had actively argued against them and convinced others to follow his alternative approach. Mr. Kellerman, may I ask what the current situation looks like? We have warehouses in 3 states filled with outdoor furniture that should have been sold 2 months ago. Garden supplies that are now out of season. Sporting goods for activities that apparently nobody is participating in anymore. Trevor is scrambling to find discount outlets, but we are looking at massive losses. What about Trevor? Trevor is still insisting that his projections were sound and that the market simply shifted unexpectedly. He is blaming external factors and requesting additional time to implement what he calls corrective strategies. I almost smiled. Trevor was doubling down instead of acknowledging the mistake. It was exactly the kind of behavior I had seen from other consultants who prioritized being right over being accurate. Ryan, I need to ask you something else. Would you be willing to come in and present your forecasting methodology to the board? They need to understand how we got into this situation and how we can prevent it from happening again. The board meeting. I had presented to the board once before, during a quarterly review 3 years ago. They had been impressed but distant, treating forecasting as a necessary but unexciting operational function. When? Monday morning, 9 a.m. I know it is short notice, but we are dealing with investor questions and the board wants answers immediately. I looked around my small home office. The regional distributor project could wait. This was something different. This was not just about vindication or proving I had been right. This was about showing everyone exactly what happened when experience and expertise were dismissed in favor of trendy theories and untested assumptions. I will be there, I said. Thank you. And Ryan, bring everything. All your models, all your data, all your documentation. The board needs to see the full scope of what we lost when we let you go. I spent the weekend preparing for the board presentation, but I also started digging deeper into what had happened at Veltri during my absence. I still had contacts within the company, and a few carefully placed phone calls revealed details that David Kellerman had not shared. My former assistant, Jennifer Walsh, met me for coffee on Saturday morning. Jennifer had worked under me for 3 years before transferring to the accounting department when my position was eliminated. Ryan, I tried to warn them, she said, stirring sugar into her coffee. When Trevor started making those massive purchase orders, I pulled up your old forecasts and showed them to my supervisor. I told them you had predicted the exact opposite trend. What happened? Trevor found out I was questioning his methods. He had me called into human resources for undermining departmental initiative and failing to support new leadership. I almost got written up. Jennifer leaned forward, lowering her voice. But that is not the worst part. Trevor did not just ignore your forecasts. He actively told people not to reference them. He said your models were based on legacy thinking and that anyone caught using old forecasting methods would be reassigned. This was new information. Trevor had not simply overlooked my work. He had deliberately suppressed it. Who else knew about this? Most of the purchasing team, some of the warehouse managers. They kept asking questions about the inventory levels, especially when the outdoor furniture orders started arriving in March. Tony Vega from the Phoenix warehouse called me directly because his facility was running out of space. Tony Vega. I remembered him. Solid manager, good instincts about regional demand patterns. If Tony was concerned about inventory levels, there was definitely a problem. Did anyone escalate these concerns? Trevor shut down all the feedback meetings. He said the new system did not require input from operational level personnel, and that questioning his projections demonstrated a lack of confidence in company leadership. I sat back, processing this information. Trevor had not just made bad decisions. He had created an environment where questioning those decisions was discouraged or punished. Jennifer glanced around the coffee shop, then pulled out her phone. Ryan, I probably should not show you this, but I took screenshots of some emails before your files were eventually deleted from the shared drive. They deleted my files? Last month, Trevor said they were consuming unnecessary server space and creating confusion among staff members. But I saved copies of the key spreadsheets. She showed me her phone screen. Email chains from April and May, with subject lines like inventory concerns, Phoenix facility, and revised forecasting questions. Each email raised legitimate operational questions, and each response from Trevor was dismissive and bureaucratic. One email from Tony Vega was particularly telling. Outdoor furniture inventory is now at 340% of normal levels for this time period. Historical data suggests we should be reducing orders, not increasing them. Request clarification on new forecasting methodology. Trevor's response. Current projections are based on advanced analytics not available in previous systems. Operational concerns should be directed through proper channels rather than questioning established procurement strategies. Jennifer, do you know if David Kellerman was aware of these communications? I do not think so. Trevor was handling all inventory reporting directly to the executive level. Mr. Kellerman was getting summaries, not the actual operational feedback. I finished my coffee, thinking about Monday's board presentation. The story was bigger than I had realized. This was not just about wrong forecasts or bad purchasing decisions. This was about systematic suppression of information and deliberate dismissal of expertise. Jennifer, would you be willing to provide copies of those emails to Mr. Kellerman? She nodded. I already printed everything out. I was hoping someone would eventually ask the right questions. I thanked Jennifer and drove home, understanding now that Monday's meeting was not just about forecasting methodology. It was about accountability and the consequences of arrogance. Sunday evening, I received an unexpected phone call from Tony Vega in Phoenix. Ryan, I heard you are presenting to the board tomorrow. I wanted you to know that several of us warehouse managers have been documenting the inventory situation since March. We have photographs, shipping records, and storage capacity reports. How did you hear about the board meeting? Word travels fast in this company, especially when $4 million of inventory is sitting in warehouses with nowhere to go. Listen, Ryan, we all knew your forecasts were solid. We tried to raise concerns through official channels, but Trevor blocked everything. Tony explained that the warehouse managers had been keeping their own informal records, tracking the disconnect between Trevor's projections and actual sales patterns. They had photographic evidence of overcrowded storage facilities and documentation of customer complaints about product availability. The real problem is not just the excess inventory, Tony continued. While Trevor was ordering massive quantities of outdoor furniture, he completely ignored your recommendations for summer electronics and home improvement supplies. We are short on the products that are actually selling. So you have both surplus and shortages? Exactly. Trevor created the worst possible scenario. Too much of what customers do not want, not enough of what they do want. Some of our biggest retail customers are threatening to switch distributors because we cannot fulfill their orders for basic items. I made notes as Tony talked, realizing that the operational impact was even more severe than David Kellerman had indicated. This was not just about financial losses from unsold inventory. It was about damaged customer relationships and missed sales opportunities. Tony, would you and the other warehouse managers be willing to present this information to the board? We already prepared a joint report, photographs, data, everything. We were hoping someone would ask for operational input instead of just looking at financial summaries. After hanging up with Tony, I spent 2 hours reorganizing my presentation. The story was not just about forecasting accuracy. It was about the systematic breakdown of communication and decision-making processes that had led to operational failure. I created 3 main sections for the board presentation. First, the forecasting methodology I had developed over 15 years, with specific examples of successful predictions and crisis avoidance. Second, a detailed comparison between my February forecasts and Trevor's purchasing decisions, with clear documentation of the warnings that had been ignored. Third, the operational evidence gathered by warehouse managers, customer feedback, and the broader impact on company relationships and market position. Monday morning arrived gray and cold. I put on my best suit, the one I had worn to Rebecca's funeral, and drove to the Veltri Dynamics headquarters for the first time in 6 months. The building looked the same but felt different. David Kellerman met me in the lobby personally, something he had never done during my 15 years of employment. Ryan, before we go upstairs, I need you to know that Trevor will be in this meeting. He requested the opportunity to present his perspective on the inventory situation. I nodded. That is fine. I think it is important for the board to hear both sides. Also, the warehouse managers will be joining us remotely. Tony Vega insisted they needed to share operational data directly with the board. We took the elevator to the executive floor. Through the glass walls of the boardroom, I could see 8 people already seated around the conference table. 7 board members and Trevor Hamilton, looking confident and prepared. David opened the door and I walked into the room carrying my laptop, a folder of printed reports and 15 years of expertise that was about to be put to the ultimate test. Good morning, everyone, I said. Thank you for inviting me to share my perspective on the current inventory situation. Trevor looked up from his notes and smiled politely. Professional, courteous, like he had not just cost the company $4 million by ignoring everything I had tried to teach him. The boardroom fell silent as I opened my laptop and connected to the projection system. 15 months of numbers, trends, and predictions filled the screen. In February, before my departure, I completed forecasting models through October, I began. These models predicted a 15% decrease in outdoor furniture demand, a 25% reduction in seasonal sporting goods, and a 30% increase in home electronics and basic home improvement supplies. I clicked to the next slide, showing Trevor's purchasing orders alongside my recommendations. The contrast was stark. Instead, Veltri tripled outdoor furniture orders and ignored electronics entirely. The result was predictable. Trevor shifted in his chair. Those forecasts were based on outdated methodologies that failed to account for emerging market trends and consumer behavior shifts. I nodded and clicked to the warehouse photographs that Tony Vega had sent. Storage facilities crammed with unsold furniture, shipping containers sitting unopened in parking lots. These photographs were taken last week at our Phoenix, Denver, and Memphis facilities, I said. $4 million in inventory that my model specifically recommended against purchasing. Board member Elizabeth Morrison leaned forward. Trevor, you reviewed these forecasts before making purchasing decisions? I reviewed them, but determined they were overly conservative and not aligned with current market opportunities, Trevor replied. I clicked to the final slide. Customer complaints, lost accounts. Retail partners switching to competitors because Veltri could not supply the electronics and home improvement items that were actually selling. The operational managers have documented evidence of these issues, I said. Tony Vega from Phoenix Warehouse is standing by to provide details. David Kellerman activated the conference call, and Tony's voice filled the room. For 10 minutes, Tony and 3 other warehouse managers presented photographs, shipping records, and customer feedback that painted a devastating picture of operational failure. When Tony finished, the boardroom was completely quiet. Chairman Walter Jenkins looked directly at Trevor. "Mr. Hamilton, do you have any response to this operational evidence?" Trevor straightened his tie. "These are temporary market adjustments that could not have been predicted using historical models. My projections were based on comprehensive analysis of emerging trends." I opened my laptop again. Actually, they were entirely predictable. I have similar patterns from 2008, 2015, and 2019. Economic uncertainty always reduces discretionary spending on outdoor furniture while increasing demand for home improvement supplies. Elizabeth Morrison studied the projection screen. "Ryan, what would have happened if your recommendations had been followed? Based on actual sales data from the past 6 months, Veltri would have generated approximately $1.2 million in additional profit instead of sitting on $4 million in unsellable inventory." Trevor started to respond, but Chairman Jenkins raised his hand. "I think we have heard enough. Trevor, please step outside. The board needs to discuss this situation privately." Trevor gathered his papers and left the room, closing the door behind him. The board voted unanimously. Trevor Hamilton's employment was terminated immediately. David Kellerman was directed to explore legal options for recovering losses caused by willful disregard of established forecasting protocols. "Ryan," Chairman Jenkins said, "we would like to offer you Trevor's position as Vice President of Operations, with full authority over forecasting and inventory management." I looked around the boardroom at faces I had rarely seen during my 15 years with the company. People who were now completely focused on my expertise and experience. "I appreciate the offer, but I will need some time to consider it." "Of course. Take whatever time you need." After the meeting, David Kellerman walked me to the parking lot. "Ryan, I want you to know that letting you go was the biggest mistake this company has made in 20 years. I got in my truck and drove home through Kansas City traffic, thinking about the offer and what it would mean. Vice President, full authority, the chance to build something even better than what I had created before. 2 weeks later, I accepted the position. My first executive decision was to restore the comprehensive forecasting methodology I had developed over 15 years. My second decision was to implement mandatory review processes that would prevent any future dismissal of operational expertise. Jennifer Walsh became my new assistant manager. Tony Vega was promoted to Director of Warehouse Operations. We began rebuilding the communication systems that Trevor had systematically dismantled. The $4 million in unsold inventory was eventually liquidated at a 60% loss. Trevor Hamilton found new employment with a consulting firm in Chicago, where he continues to provide advice on supply chain optimization. I kept the email thread from the day David Kellerman first called me, not as a reminder of vindication but as evidence that expertise and experience cannot be replaced by theories and assumptions. Sometimes the numbers speak louder than words.